So thanks for coming. My name is Rodrigo. I'm a production engineer at Facebook here in London. And I'll talk to you about the journey to production engineering, or how Facebook actually moved from a completely different model of managing systems to what it is today. So I'll start with my own misconceptions about Facebook engineering. I'll talk about a brief story of time, or how things ended up getting the way they are now, and what has changed, right? What actually we have changed in the way that we work in order to get to the point that we are. And finally, in the end, I'll talk a little bit about the engagement models, or how production engineers engage with other teams across the company, and how that relationship works. So who am I, right? As I said, I'm a production engineer at Facebook since November of last year. Actually, I'm completing 1 year today. So I started in Facebook here in London in November the 2nd of last year. Before that, I worked. Thank you. But they didn't kick me out yet. So before that, I worked in a giant retailer in Latin America, not the one that begins with an A and ends with Amazon. But it's a quite a large one. And I share the pain of managing cloud infrastructure in this kind of environment. So, and I always watched those presentations and YouTube videos and all that stuff about Facebook engineering. And I always thought that, oh, these guys are really smart. And I thought, it was always like this, right? I mean, they started like that, and they did it the right way. And I was wrong, right? I was completely wrong. After I got there, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is understand how these organizations evolve with time and how they get to the situation that they are. And I started to do some archaeology, understanding how my own team became what it was, right? So I went to talk to my boss and ask him, hey, how we get here, right? And I started to see some presentations, read some materials, and understand from people that were there for more time than I, obviously. I just joined the company, but I was trying to understand, okay, how it was before that, right? And, well, I mean, turns out it was pretty much like the classic silo infrastructure, right? It was pretty much like any traditional technology company, operations and development, right? There was operations was a separate engineering team that had absolutely different goals. So basically, it was you keep the site up while the others try to break it. And obviously, you know that if you're here, I believe that you understand that this is probably not the best approach. And there was actually a wall separating the teams in the old office in Palo Alto, right? So whenever someone from engineering had to talk to people in operations, they need to go through a maze of meeting rooms and desks and etc. just to get there and see those guys that are actually trying to make sure that the site was up. And as you can think, it was always like, oh, these guys don't want to change anything, and the other guys, oh, they always want to break the site, right? So the operations team was firefighting all the time. They are basically continuously firefighting, and were not able to do anything valuable because they're simply just trying to keep the site up. So there was the traditional tug of war, right? I mean, there is this motto from Facebook, like move fast and break things. Just imagine telling that to a team that actually was supposed to keep the site up, right? It's like, well, I don't agree with that, right? Because we need to keep the site up, so not everyone is having fun breaking the site. So there is this misalignment, lots of separate goals. The management structure was separated. So, I mean, it obviously was not working out. One example that I have is about the bootcamp, right? And coincidentally, I'm wearing the bootcamp t-shirt. So the bootcamp is a 6 weeks training that every engineer that joins Facebook go through. Basically, engineers, managers, director, anyone that is involved with engineering goes through this 6 weeks training process where you learn about how to push code, how to deploy code, how to make sure that things will work, how to debug things in production, etc. And the operations team that was called SRE back then, they didn't join bootcamp, right? They didn't go through the process. And when my actual manager joined the company, he asked, hey, can I go through bootcamp? Because he read about it, he thought it was cool, and he wanted to join it. And the answer was, why do you want to join bootcamp? You never push code to the site. So there's no reason for you to join bootcamp. And he was quite disappointed about that because of, wow, I mean, everyone says it's really cool. I want to do that. But there was no expectation that they would actually deliver code. It was like, well, something breaks, you restart. Something breaks again, you restart again. And that's what you do. You're not supposed to be delivering code. You're not supposed to be pushing code. You're supposed just to make things work, right? And that was the SRE team back in 2009. So it was supposedly it was based on Google's SRE model, but I mean, I tried to dig into that because, as I said, this is really something that I'm passionate about. And I was like, okay, but Google SRE has this set of things, right? You have this amount of time for you to do your own work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How close were you to that? And the answer was like, well, we're not actually close to that at all. It was a glorified operations team that just struggled to keep the site running, right? They couldn't do anything other than that. And the engagement with the developers was zero, right? There was no engagement at all. There was no empathy. One side didn't understand the other. It was a nightmare. As I said, this was back in 2009. So in 2010, right, they decided to start to change that, right? So they started to have an idea like, okay, let's see how we can move forward while at the same time we understand that people still need to keep the site up, right? We cannot like stop everything we're doing and stop pushing code just because we need to fix the organization. So basically they split SRE into two separate teams. One is called SRO, which was Site Reliability Operations, which was basically admitting that, well, we are doing operations, we are not doing any engineering, so it's pointless to label as something that we don't do, right? And the other team was AppOps. But there was a twist, right? While SRO was a team that was supposed to keep the site up, they should be the ones trying to automate as much as they could of what they are doing. So back then, they started to work on a tool that is still in use. It's called FBAR, stands for Facebook Automatic Remediation, which is basically a host-based daemon that has a certain set of rules and decides what you need to do whenever it needs to restart something or reboot the host, and it acts on a very simple set of rules, like, well, I mean, I don't have an IPv6 address anymore, what should I do? Or Chef is not running, what should I do? Or the daemon stopped working, or the load is going nuts, what should I do, right? And it automatically does that, and while it does that, it feeds, right, a data set and says, hey, I mean, this is happening in this host, right? So they started to apply these rules and trying to automate themselves out of the job, while at the same time, they keep doing the job of making sure the site was up. Another thing that they started doing was actually automating provisioning. So they stopped this, obviously it was automated to a certain extent, but it was not ideal at all. It was dependent a lot of human intervention to actually turn up a cluster or turn up even a single host. So they started to work on that and automate stuff while keeping the site up. So basically they're like, well, I mean, if I had to do that, instead of doing that again, I'll just create a rule in FBAR and make sure that whenever that happens again, FBAR will kick in and solve the problem for me. Another thing that was AppOps. So AppOps, they worked on a completely different model. They worked engage with certain selected engineering teams, right? So let's take these teams that are more, let's say, have more empathy by what we are trying to do here, and let's just engage them with a set of engineers that have a different mindset and that have a different skill set, right? And make sure that, and let's see how that works, right? So a few years later, in 2012, SRO basically automated most of the work they are doing. They outlived their usefulness, and the team was decommissioned. It was like, okay, we don't need SRO anymore. Which was kind of celebrated, but there was a twist. Some things have changed, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. So AppOps back then was rebranded as PE, right? And then PE came to be as it is today, which is individual production engineering teams that work embedded with the other engineering teams. So basically, we don't have an operations team anymore. And we still don't do, right? I mean, we don't have operations. It's every single team has a set of engineers embedded with them. Sometimes they share their roadmap, sometimes they don't. I'll explain that in engagement part, but the production engineers work together with the individual engineers teams that we have there. So what PEs bring to the table, right? What's the difference? So they have a much more, let's say, laser-focused approach on things like scalability and reliability. That's kind of the different skill set that they bring. But to do that, we need to change some things, right? And the very first thing was, we need to change hiring. We need to change the way we hire PEs. Before that, to hire for SRO or AppOps, it was basically like, let's say, a simplified set of interviews just to figure out if you had some knowledge about operating systems and how to debug and troubleshoot problems. But then it changed to something a little, or actually much more complicated, which was, okay, we want engineers that can troubleshoot network issues on a, not exactly network engineers, right? We are not replacing the network engineers that worked on routers, switches, etc. But we want people that are able to figure out what is wrong on a host level whenever something breaks, right? So we are losing packets, or we are retransmitting packets, or we are fragmenting, etc. We want someone who's able to go there and say, okay, I understand what's wrong here, right? I can understand what's wrong on a network level, and I can ask network engineers to fix it, or I can fix it by myself. And I don't need to simply forward the test and say, hey, I have no idea what's going on here. The second thing that we added was a systems interview, which is basically resemble what we had before, which is, okay, whenever you go there, I want to make sure that, let's say, if I have a host that has high load, I want you to be able to use the tools to figure out what is going on and what is happening with the host, right? The other thing was about architecture. So this interview is basically make something that will scale out to 10 million users or 10,000 hosts or 100,000 hosts or whatever, right? Let's see how you think, right? Tell me how would you do that? It can start for something like design for me a simple system, and then, okay, once you have it working, now scale to 100x the current throughput that you have in the system. Just show me how you think, right? How you think through this problem. The other thing is about software. So we added a coding interview to the process, which is basically, okay, if you were expected to engage with the engineering teams, you should be able to code, right? It's not only about troubleshooting things anymore. Now you actually be delivering code, sometimes in the same code base that they are working on. And this is probably one of the biggest changes that we made, right? As I said before this change, production engineers were not expected to be delivering code. Right now, I mean, if you're not able to do it, you don't even pass through the interviews. And finally, culture, right? There's one particular interview, which is, do you have the cultural fit to actually join a team and be successful there? It's much more about how happy we will be working with us. It's not only about if you have the right, let's say, DevOps mindset or whatever, but it's like, wow, I mean, we have a certain environment with a certain culture, and we want to make sure that you'll be successful there. So these are the 5 interviews that we have now in order to hire production engineers at Facebook. And then the next change was probably the most critical change that was made, and obviously there's a cat picture, right? Which was, okay, we don't have an operations team anymore, right? So who's on call? So that was the face of the engineers, and he told them, everyone is on call, right? So if no one's on call, everyone is on call. And that includes not only the PEs, but the software engineers. And that means the managers, and that means the directors, and that means everyone is on call, right? Everyone is sharing the pain. Whenever something goes wrong, right, everyone must understand that this must be fixed, right? Coincidentally or not, after this was made, the amount of critical saves has potentially decreased, right? Not true, but anyway. You might ask me, okay, but that didn't actually make things go slower because now people are afraid to make changes because it will break and they will need to fix it. Surprisingly, no. Surprisingly, things started to go even faster, right? After the initial shock, where some people even left the company, people started to understand that, okay, this thing about reliability and availability is important, right? We need to make sure that actually the code works. And this has been like this until now, and quite frankly, it's, the lack of a better word, I would say it's fair, right? Whenever someone does something, he understands that he'll be the one responsible for fixing it, right? No matter if he's a software engineer or a production engineer, no matter if he's like a very senior engineer or someone who just graduated from bootcamp, you'll be on call, right? And you need to figure out what to do to fix this problem. Needless to say, as I mentioned, I mean, it was not as easy as I'm explaining here, right? There was a lot of criticism, people telling that, oh, my whole team will disband, we will not accept that. But I mean, it was a part of the process, right? We need to go through that to make sure that everyone understood that we are in a new model. And another thing that is very important is that we cannot see a way to scale out operations if we don't do that, right? Just imagine like thousands of engineers pushing code, creating new systems, creating new services. How do you expect that an individual team, right, will be able to cope with this progress and will be able to keep learning how these things work and be able to fix it? It simply doesn't work like that. So there's something that we need to do anyway. The third part, which is very important actually, there's a whole talk about this, to be honest. It's about blameless postmortems, right, which you call SAV review. SAV stands for side event, which is whenever something breaks, as you can imagine, we have a SAV, right? SAVs have different categories, right? They range from 1 to 4, where 1 means the site is down, to 4 means we might be losing some packets between Sweden and New York City, right? Nothing is really broken, no one is noticing, but, well, I mean, that can scale very quickly if no one takes a look, right? So we call it SAV review, right? Important things about the SAV review, or SAV review in a nutshell, right? We have 2 main SAV reviews. One is hosted in London, the other one is hosted in Menlo Park. And they cover the SAVs that happened in the week before the meeting that were, let's say, critical or that had some risk for the website, right? Not necessarily something that broke for the user, but something that might break if no one did anything. One important thing is that there are some, let's say, some forbidden questions, right? So forbidden questions are something like, how can we make sure that this will never happen again? We never ask this question. Like this, like, if you ask this question, you're out, right? Don't do that. The question that we always make is, how can we make sure that whenever this happens again, it will not have the same impact, right? Because it will happen again. So, I mean, we are trying to be more realistic about the approach and say, hey, I mean, yeah, that guy deleted data, right? And that caused X. How can we make sure that whenever someone deletes data again, this will not happen? So we go over that every single week. It's a very important meeting to us. I mean, in the US, some very senior leaderships attends the meeting, and because we understand that this is really valuable. And the same happens here in London. And we go over that. And the good thing is that everyone that goes there understands that, I mean, they will be welcome there, right? No one will be pointing fingers. No one will be blaming them. No one will be asking, why did you do this, right? It's like, well, I mean, we believe in good intents, right? We believe that people wanted to move forward, and that's why they did it. Something went wrong, right? Let's figure out how we can make sure that this will not go wrong when you do it again, or whenever someone else does it again. That doesn't mean that someone can just keep doing things wrong over and over again, right? That's not what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that we understand that if we have this open and respectful approach, right, people will feel comfortable to keep moving fast, right? Which is something that, as I said, is one motto that we have, and we keep that this is very important to us. But if people are scared to make changes because they might break the site, right? Obviously, they start to slow down, and that's not what we want. So the last thing I want to talk about is about the engagement models that we have, right? Obviously, this is a 30,000 feet view of the engagement models that we have. At Facebook, we have basically SWEs and PEs, stands for software engineers and production engineers. And not every team has production engineers, right? Simply because for some teams it doesn't make any sense. Teams that work very level on the stack, or front-end teams, or people that work on, let's say, JavaScript frameworks, right? It doesn't, I mean, I can see some ways that it could work, right? But most of the time they don't need PEs, right? They don't need support from someone to say how we make sure that this scales out because, well, it either runs on a desktop or runs on a very specific set of machines or actually leverages on infrastructure that is already managed by someone else. So in these cases, we have no SWEs working with them. Sorry, no PEs working with them. The second engagement model that we have is PE-only teams. Yeah, that exists. Particularly, and that happens actually in two opposite sides of this range, right? So we have some very, let's say, high-level PE teams that manage, how can I say that? They are, let's say, the last line of defense whenever something breaks in some unexpected way and no one is able to figure out what's wrong, right? So we have some teams that are usually composed by very senior engineers that work on, let's say, a more broader spectrum, right? They kind of bring different skill sets to the table and understand about different things, and they're like, okay, this is happening because it's more like a butterfly flaps its wings in Pacific, right? And then a hurricane happens somewhere else. It's more like it's people that can make this relationship and understand what is wrong, right? The other side of the spectrum is PEs that work on very specific stuff related to data center infrastructure management, building management systems, and network, right? So we have a set of PEs that are very specific to this problem domain, and they work focused on that. The third model that we have is that when SWEs and PEs work in the same team, but they don't share the same roadmap. One example is teams that, let's say that team that is building a certain new system, right? And we need someone to build a specific provisioning, image provisioning service for this system, right? Then PEs kick in and say, okay, this is the kind of thing that I know how to do. This is the kind of thing that I'm an expert, but not necessarily I need to share the roadmap with you. I can build my own system, right? And we'll make sure that these things will work together in the end. So they, as I said, they share on-call. They share the roadmaps in the sense that one talks to the other and say, hey, this is the way I'm trying to do this. What do you think? But they work on different sets of the stack. And the last model is whenever we have SWEs and PEs working together on the same roadmap, right? In these cases, let's say PEs have a much more direct approach, and usually their goals are much shorter than the SWEs, right? But they basically work together. They are working together on the same code base and delivering the same code, but it's more like, okay, I see a pattern here that if we keep doing that, we will not be able to scale by 10x whenever this system hits production. So let's make sure that we fix that before that happens. But as I said, I mean, they're actually pushing code and making sure that this works. It's not a consultancy, right? They're not there to just propose things to the team. They're there to actually make the changes. So key takeaways, right? So the things that I like you to think about. So hiring for the right skill sets and attitude will save you time in the long run, right? It's something that, as I said, I mean, we have this very, I would say, slightly complex recruiting and hiring model. It might sound worksome, and it is, right? It takes a lot of time. Just imagine going through all these interviews for everyone that is hired. But actually, whenever we find this person that actually fits what we need, I mean, we are sure that this will work, right? We are sure that this relationship will work in the long run. So for us, definitely DevOps is a cultural shift, but we avoid naming a team with that name, right? So, I mean, we understand that sometimes this kind of excludes people and might feel that, well, there's the DevOps team, I'm not DevOps, so I don't care, right? And we try to make sure that everyone understands, hey, I mean, DevOps for us is a cultural shift. Everyone works like that, right? And we should follow this pattern, right? But we don't have an exclusive team that does that. For us, everyone is doing DevOps at the same time. The third thing is that engineers should be accountable for the software they deliver, right? If you build it, you own it, right? And by own it, I mean, if it breaks, someone needs to fix it, right? And you'll be the one fixing it. One interesting thing is that we have this peer review approach, right? Whenever someone pushes diff, someone else needs to review it. And you might ask me, okay, but let's say that someone who actually pushed the code is on PTO or whatever. Well, whoever reviewed the code will be on call, right? And say, hey, I mean, you need to fix that because you gave me a thumbs up to push this into production, so come here and fix this thing. And one more thing, one last thing that I hear a lot of times, and it's quite important, right? Well, some people believe that we only can do this because we are Facebook, right? Don't listen to these people, right? As I said, I mean, I've worked in a large retailer where basically I was responsible for making all these changes there, right? And it's doable, right? You can do it. No matter if you're in a big company or a small company. I've worked in small companies as well. And you can do it if you want, right? It's not a Facebook's exclusive thing, right? You can do it, I'll argue, mostly everywhere, right? And it definitely helps you to have a good relationship and engagement between the software engineers and your DevOps team, production engineers, SRE, no matter how I call it, right? The name doesn't matter that much, but it's definitely doable if you put some effort in doing that. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Rodrigo, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, so we're in between you and your first anniversary bootcamp dinner. Do you have any time for a question?
So what?
You got any time for a question?
Yeah, sure, I do.
Anybody got a question? Should have asked that first, really. I thought there'd be a few. Okay, I'm going to go there because you're closest.
Thank you. Where do architects fit into this model?
Sorry?
Architecture, where does that fit in? So you mentioned there about your production engineers are basically taking ownership of, in your hiring process, you're looking at people who understand systems. So when you have a new feature or product on in the roadmap, do you have a separate team that's architecting that from a that's taking ownership of the production aspects as well as the actual functionality of the software, or is that something that the team have the autonomy to take ownership for themselves?
Okay, good question. Yeah, I mean, I answered this question yesterday, so it's fresh on my mind. So no, we don't have an architecture team, right? Each team is responsible for their own services, and they build their own architecture. The question that sometimes come up is how can you make sure that they are making the best decisions, right? Or how can you make sure that they are not wasting their time or building something that someone else already built, right? Surprisingly, at least for me, right, the collaborations tool that we use actually work, right? The reason why I'm surprised is because in the past I've seen these. This is probably related to the company culture, right? But in the past I've seen these things like, well, people post notes and documents and whatever, and no one actually reads it, right? So there is this let's say, common behavior that whenever someone is trying to work on something new, they create a post, an internal post, right? And make sure that it shares with the right groups and say, hey, I was thinking about building something to solve this problem, right? And that's the approach I'm trying to make. I'll be hosting a whiteboard session this day, and you can join via video conference or whatever. And that's what I'm trying to solve, right? And surprisingly, as I said, at least to me, is that there's a lot of cooperation whenever that happens, right? There's a lot of cooperation whenever that happens. people just flood the post with questions and ideas and comments, right? And people start to build over that. But there's no architecture team, right? Every single team, let's say we have these functional groups, if you can call it that way, right? That work on, let's say, data infrastructure, networking, HHVM, for example, right, which is our main engine for PHP and etc., right? So people actually understand that, okay, this is where I should be talking about this, or this is where I should be discussing this. They just post to the tribe, and then the collaboration works, right? People just, some people just say, hey, I mean, you should not be doing that at all, right? You're completely wrong. But most of the time, it's very collaborative and cooperative. That answers your question?
It does. I mean, I think something of the sort of way our organization here is very ITIL driven.
Mm-hmm.
There's always questions around governance and sign off and people making sure they're doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing. Obviously, that kind of a model is very self-governing,
mm-hmm.
self-regulating. I'm not sure how that would work in an environment that's more heavily regulated.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from, because I need to go through that in a retailer, right? I can share I can share some material with you that I have from my previous life that might be helpful, right? I understand that this kind of regulation is really critical, but there are ways to circumvent this without actually breaking the compliance.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, one more question. There's one over there somewhere who had a hand up before. Yep. Okay.
Going to blameless postmortems are really important for a successful organisation. The company I work for at the moment is, we were talking about burnout earlier in the corporate culture. The company I work for at the moment, it's always somebody else's fault. Somebody else did it, big boys did it and they ran away. My last job I worked for a Formula 1 racing team. After every race we got a race faults report, and every single fault that happened was reported. There was a loose wheel and the wheel fell off. Mm-hmm. If the driver's drink bottle malfunctioned, that's important. If a component came that didn't fit, or there was a gearbox failure, it was reported. And it was honestly reported, and everyone in the company knew what had gone wrong that weekend. And that is very, very important for a successful organisation. You're not sweeping something under the carpet. And if there's a gearbox failure, if you don't report that, it's going to happen next time. And that is really important, and not just in IT, in the wider success of an organisation.
Was that actually a question?
Yeah.
Sounds like a good candidate for another talk, though.
But
yeah, we all agree. Cool. Okay, cool. Just one more question. Anybody else?
I think there was one.
Cool, down here.
My initial question was something related to the gentleman over their side, or the architectural team. Do you have any role for technical architect, or is there any requirement for any this similar role in your organization?
For the role?
Yeah, technical architect. What do they do?
Well, okay. Let's put it that way. At this point, Facebook is so big, right, that there might be some team that is specific for that, right? But at least if the teams that I'm aware of, no, there's no specific set. It's basically software engineers and PEs that does this kind of job. There's no specific skill set.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rodrigo, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Cool.